Welcome to this session where we'll look at an analysis of methods for intercultural training. Here we'll look at methods of intercultural education from a traditional versus a modern. Some of these modern methods are probably even going to become traditional, and so we need to be aware of that, and will become traditional, I should say. We need to be aware of that and not hold fastly to those. From the traditional standpoint, we look at lectures, some role-playing, and role-playing could be modern as well, but in past days, if you've done any kind of intercultural training in the past, I know, for example, for me, before we moved overseas, we were involved in situations where we role-played. Written material, obviously, being able to read case studies, things like that, incidences, not necessarily where we were in a case where we had to analyze it, but actually just reading about it. And then, of course, critical incidences and seeing how things play out in different cultures, and maybe that's what you've been exposed to. From a modern standpoint, we'll look at self-assessments, and like I said, we'll share some more of that in the next lecture with all of the different instruments that are out there that are very useful in helping for training people to work in different cultures and becoming aware of different areas. Technology-based approaches, obviously with the internet and online, we've got all kinds of great opportunities. Things like Rosetta Stone are out there, as well as being able to surf in other countries and view things from their viewpoint, for example, for news coverage and things like that, to be able to look at a newspaper in China and translate it, use the translator for back to English, or from Russia, or from some country in Europe, and being able to view how they report the news. Simulation games, very effective in modern. Films, I guess those could be both either traditional or modern, but more and more films informing us. But once again, remember the media bias, and careful of that, and to kind of weigh all that. Case studies, as we talked about, being involved in case studies. And then this next one, I think, is really come to light lately because of our ability to be able to travel with aviation, to get across the world in pretty rapid time with jet travel. We're able to go into different cultures and have that immersion experience. I know a lot of young people do that during college, university time, or whatever. Maybe some go on Peace Corps, if you maybe have done that. But the opportunities are greater than they were in the past for being able to travel internationally. So I would just suggest that you mix the tried and true with the new. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but use both. Those things that are very effective. Take multiple factors in consideration when selecting the methods that you're going to use. Obviously, we mentioned earlier about the culture that you're actually working in, or the people that you're training, the culture that you're training folks to go into. And then, of course, your training style and your learners' learning styles. So there's many things to consider. And keep all the layers of the training in mind when working with your trainees. Being open to other viewpoints and seeing things from a different way, and maybe another way to present your material. Classroom training is only one avenue. As you think about yourself, you're more of a trainer, a teacher, a coach, or a counselor. When you think about how you best learn, do you learn in a group, or you learn better one-on-one, or working with someone? And we see that current focus is being projected onto coaching, consulting, or advising. We see groups coming alongside of others that are preparing to work in a different culture, and those that have expertise, and we're seeing it more of a content expert in these areas, being able to help folks to learn and to be able to adapt into working in a different culture. Think about whether you're a trainer, a teacher, a coach, or a counselor. On this area here in training across cultures or training about cultures will really affect the type of trainer that you are, your style, if you're a coach or a counselor, an advisor. When we go to training across cultures, this occurs when working with a group of people from a single other culture or a group of people from many cultures. So you're training actually working with, say for example, to somebody to work in the UN. You have people from multiple cultures there, and so you're working with a group of people to work with other cultures, not just one culture in particular. Would be a very generalized training that you might offer, in being able to give examples from different cultures that you are working with that are represented in the training, and helping people to gain an appreciation of the cultures that are represented and understand that there are folks that they will be working with that think differently or view things differently, or even how things may come across to a different culture and how things are said or stated. And then training about cultures, this is where it teaches the people about the subject of intercultural relation. Here we're just basically more of a generic kind of a training session or educating people that intercultural relations is a critical area. It's more about training about the culture and about cultural work, adapting, and how to work best in other cultures rather than getting a specific culture in mind. The most significant influence on intercultural training is culture. And for example, some Asian cultures are circular and indirect, whereas the USA and Canada is more linear and direct. If I have a problem with somebody in the United States, I might go and talk to them individually. Where in Asian cultures, that would be very offensive. So you may speak indirectly, maybe speak to a group. You wouldn't necessarily go and humiliate somebody. And then also think about this with the tight culture versus the loose culture, and how this might affect your training session. For example, a tight culture could be represented by Japan, where deviation from the norm is unacceptable, and they're expected to follow certain behaviors. When you're up there teaching people from this tight culture, you want to be very serious and very straightforward with them, because they're going to follow exactly what you say and will follow in that pattern. Whereas a loose culture, deviation from the norm is tolerated to a greater degree. So you can have more freedom and more dynamic presentation, or see how you feel them out, and if there's an opportunity to maybe adjust your presentation on the fly. The loose culture of the U.S. is more of a, rather than expected to follow certain behaviors, more of a free to express your own opinion. Here I want to just talk a little bit about experiential learning cycle as it pertains to intercultural training. And we see here the concrete, the reflective observation, the abstract conceptualization, the active experimentation, and goes around. This really, you want to make sure that this addresses the 4 learning styles. And each trainer needs to include the 4 training styles in their training sessions. When you're training people, you want to make sure that you have some concrete experience doing, where they have an experience. You also want to make sure that they're able to have some opportunity to reflect in their reflective observation, where they review and reflect on the experience, and then move into an abstract area where abstract conceptualization, the concluding area, learning from the experience. So kind of what did we learn at the end, and sharing about the overall experience of what they were able to learn. And then in the active experimentation is where the planning phase comes in and trying out what you have learned. So now going out back into the workplace, or maybe put them in a role playing or in a case study where they can actually try out what they've learned. And the important thing is that you can enter this cycle from anywhere. So you could actually start the training, your learning or education on intercultural education, going from this learning cycle. You could start at abstract conceptualization and go around into active experimentation, the concrete experience, reflective observation. That's a very neat component of the experiential learning cycle as it pertains to intercultural training. The last thing I want to mention in this lecture is whether you should buy your own material from a company or bring a consultant in, or should you develop your own. It's customized to your organization or to your needs, to your education experience, wherever you may find yourself. It's in a school or a business or something like that. Keep this in mind that commercially produced training materials are available, but they are pretty expensive. You really have to consider what your budget allows you to do. Keep this in mind that almost all of your training materials need to be customized to fit a particular need. So even if you buy something and you spend a lot of money on it, you're going to need to probably most likely customize that to your audience. And so there are a lot of good things out there to use, obviously. A lot of things on the internet that you can even use, and probably just put together your own training program and, with all the material that is available. It takes a little bit more time, but then again, just depends on what's more available, time or money, and what you can use.